Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today, we're doing our first NBA episode in a long time, since midway through free agency, mid-July, maybe even early July. Today, we will be covering our top 4 most intriguing teams going into this season. It doesn't mean best team by chance, doesn't mean, most likely contenders, just most intriguing to watch for heading into 2023. But before we get into all that, make sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're going to keep making content twice a week going forward. And joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing?
Doing well. Make sure you go check out our live episode that I just recorded with Emmy. Gotten great feedback so far on the Deep in the Heart of Longhorn series that I've been hosting 2 times a week. Sometimes will be 3 times a week. We will see. Go check that out. We just live streamed it earlier tonight. It's the beginning of football season. It's the end of summer. It's the start of fall. And likely for at least the next 2 or 3 weeks as we get into college football season and NFL season, we will be talking mainly football. But as we end the end of September, getting into October, we will start to talk a lot more basketball. But we just wanted to satiate y'all's basketball appetites here with a couple episodes, probably one in September and one here right at the end of August. Because we haven't talked basketball in a while, and we thought this would be a really fun episode. We each picked 4 teams from the NBA that we deem intriguing, because since all the offseason moves for the most part have been made, that we deem intriguing going into training camp here in about a month. So let's get right into it. Why not? How are we going to do this? Do we want to alternate? I don't rank my teams from most intriguing to least intriguing, or least intriguing to most intriguing, but I sort of have an idea. Do you just want to go like bottom to top?
Yeah, I think we just switch off here.
Okay.
I'll start with my first team, the Orlando Magic. This team last year won 34 games. The year before won, I believe it was 22 games. So pretty good incremental improvement from the Magic. And going into this year 2 of Paolo Banchero, year 3 of Franz Wagner, this team is looking to take that next jump into the 40 win range, and I fully expect them to be there. This is a team that defends at a high level, and with the shot creation of Paolo Banchero and the continued growth that he's showing as a player, I think Paolo and Franz are going to really feed off each other. Markelle Fultz is going to have another season healthy offseason to continue to work on his game as well. I think this Magic team is going to be really fun to watch. They're going to play fast. They're young. They have a good mix of veteran talent in there as well. They brought in Joe Ingles from the Milwaukee Bucks as well. I think overall this team is set to take that jump. It's the roster talent is there. It's just all about going out and getting it done and learning how to win.
I definitely consider the Magic. A lot of really good young talent there. Excited to watch Banchero and how he progresses with a year under his belt, being the number 1 pick in last year's draft. Had a really good rookie season. Some of the other pieces they have there, I'm really excited about. I need to see it, but intriguing, yes, absolutely. And they're a team that if you had to pick one from like the bottom tier of the Eastern Conference to make a leap in 2023, I'd probably say the Magic as well. But I went in another direction, stayed in the Eastern Conference. My first team is going to be the Indiana Pacers. The Indiana Pacers won 35 games last season, went 35-47, and they made some really good moves, some moves I really like this offseason. First of all, they gave Tyrese Halliburton, their star point guard, their star guard, an extension, which he well deserved. Miles Turner returns. They did have a winning record in games in which Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner played last year. They were 26 and 22 when those two were on the court together. Encouraging finish to last year. I really like what they did in the draft, bringing in Jarris Walker, 8th overall. I think that's an A pick at the 8th overall draft position. Versatility to switch defensively. I think he pairs well and complements Miles Turner on that end of the floor on both ends. I think he has the strength to defend the paint effectively. He has the size and strength and length to do that. And I think he can be a playmaker on the short roll and the pick and roll with Tyrese Halliburton. He can be another playmaker out of those sets. So I really like Jarris Walker, the pick out of Houston. I love what they did in free agency. They bring in Bruce Brown, who was one of the stars of the finals last year with the Nuggets. Really solid player, smart player, versatility, great defender, solid defender, solid shooter. Really like what he brings. Championship kind of veteran experience. Really good moving without the ball. Another guy who's going to be, I think, really good, solid contributor for this team. And they trade for Obi Toppin from the New York Knicks, who, in games that he started with New York, which is very few, I think it was around 13, he averaged 20 points per game in the games that he started for the Knicks. Really talented player. Loved him coming out of Dayton with his athleticism. Super athletic, versatile. I think he fits the mold of this Indiana organization and their vision really well. And with all the other talent that surrounds those additions, with Tyrese Halliburton, of course, Benedict Mathurin, who was their lottery pick out of Arizona from a year ago and showed some really good things last year. And then solid role players like Andrew Nimhard and Aaron Nesmith. I think Indiana is a team to potentially watch as another one of those teams that, if they stay healthy, could be around that 40-win mark, be in that play-in range, and maybe make some noise.
Yeah. Definitely, man. I had Indiana as my other Eastern Conference team, and for all the reasons you mentioned, but the reason I really think this team can take another leap is the depth. They go two or three deep at every single position. At point guard, you got Tyrese Halliburton and TJ McConnell, one of the most underrated backup point guards in the NBA, in my opinion. Then at the two spot, you have Benedict Mathurin. You can throw in Buddy Hield as well in different lineups if you want to go with some versatility there. Um, in the front court, Jarris Walker. You just mentioned Obi Toppin as well. They also brought in Bruce Brown, who can really play three different positions. We saw him play small ball center with the Nets, which in hindsight is just so wild. But regardless, they run two or three deep at every single position, and I mean that's going to serve them really well because you're not going to stay healthy throughout an entire 82 game season, throughout an entire 82 game grind. So being too deep and going off the bench to a guy like Jalen Smith, who at one point in time was a highly touted first round pick for the Suns. I think the options there and versatility there is really high level.
Yeah, I really like Indiana. They are very intriguing to me, especially the fact that, as I mentioned, when Turner and Halliburton played together, they were 26 and 22. As you mentioned, they have the depth. Love their offseason additions with Jarris Walker in particular. There's another guy that they drafted. Gosh, I can't remember his name. He was a higher upside type guy at around like mid to late first round. Really good shooter. I'll have to look it up, but really like that high upside pick. They have the depth. Love Halliburton. I think he takes another step. So love Indiana. My second team, and I actually since we're doing 4 teams, I went 2 East, 2 West, just to split it up. I don't know if you did that, but that just was my thinking here. I went with the Cleveland Cavaliers, and I'll tell you why. Uh, First of all, this Cleveland team, they went out, did the big move last year, brought in Donovan Mitchell. They had Darius Garland, who's made an all-star team already. Evan Mobley, who's fantastic, can guard all 5 positions, and has that versatility as a rim protector and is developing a more, I guess, stable game and consistently being consistent offensively. That resulted in 51 wins last year. They made their first trip to the playoffs since 2018, their first trip to the playoffs without LeBron James since the 1990s. But despite having one of the league's best records in the regular season, despite having the second best point differential in the regular season and being one of the better defensive teams in the NBA, they were easily ousted by the New York Knicks in 5 games in that first round playoff series. And I would classify it as somewhat of a disappointment if you are the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, what did they do this offseason? Well, they made some moves and they brought in some guys at positions of need. I think they're going to have more depth at positions of need this year. They address wing depth and lack of perimeter shooting. They brought in Max Strus, who was a key guy for the Heat last year. And they also brought in Gorgeous Niang. Those guys aren't going to blow you away defensively, but they're certainly, I think, more than adequate defensively, and they bring some shooting to the table, which I like. Some off-the-ball shooting. Neither are especially strong defensively, but I think with Evan Mobley's defensive versatility, you still have Jarrett Allen there, I believe, but we'll see what happens with his future if Cleveland decides to maybe trade him when it gets closer to the deadline, which I think could potentially be in the cards. With Evan Mobley's defensive versatility, and you still have a guy like Isaac Okoro who can be sort of like that defensive specialist as he's shown throughout his young NBA career. I like those moves, and I also like bringing in Ty Jerome as another guy in that backcourt who got a lot of experience last year with Golden State. I know him very well in my history watching college basketball as a fan of the University of Virginia. Backcourt depth and shooting, more shooting behind Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland. I don't think they had a first-round draft pick, so they didn't really do a whole lot in the draft, I don't think, of note, not that I can remember. But I like the moves that they made with the resources that they had. They're probably, we can have the conversation about whether or not they're true contenders in the East once it gets closer to the season. But I like the fact that they at least tried to address issues with shooting as a team that took the 7th least amount of 3-pointers last season and were bottom half of the league in 3-point percentage. They tried to address that. They got guys who will willingly take those shots, take some pressure off of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, and are more than capable defensively, although they're not really going to blow you away. I still think they're in need of that alpha on the wing, but they did improve in that area, and I like that for Cleveland.
Yeah. Cleveland had a good offseason. They really flew under the radar. And their needs were pretty self-explanatory. They just needed quality wing play. Any type they could get, just quality wing play and shooting. Those were really the main 2 needs they had, and they addressed them. For my next team, I went with a bit of a homer pick here. I went with the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks last year were as high as 5th in the West at certain points in time last year, but never really found that consistency at any point in time. They were just kind of hanging around 500, and then, of course, made that huge move to go get Kyrie Irving, which didn't work out in the moment. And as a Mavericks fan, we kind of knew trading away Dorian Finney-Smith, the heart and soul of this defense, It was going to be a struggle to defend at a high level, especially with Maxi Kleba out of the lineup at that time. And that turned out to be the case. The defense fell off a cliff, and the offense couldn't pick up the slack. This year, though, another year of Josh Green improving. They brought in Seth Curry, and most importantly, brought in defensive wings. What the heck? Shut up, Siri. Brought in defensive wings, Grant Williams, and drafted Olivier Maxence Prosper as well. The depth here is a lot better. I think, if you were to nitpick, you would say you want a couple more wings. Maybe just a couple more here and there to add a little bit more depth. But I think this team is ready to get back into playoff contention and even challenge for a top 5 seed.
I was tempted, man, to, even throw my Spurs into the conversation selfishly, just because of the obvious. I mean, Victor Wembanyama and so forth. But yeah, I can absolutely see where you're coming from with Dallas. They were another team I considered. I'm going to move to my next team because I had the feeling that it's all going to culminate in a big conversation about one team in particular that we're probably going to have in common at the very end, if I'm guessing. And one of the reasons we were doing this episode was to talk about this team in particular, this mystery team that y'all don't know yet. So I'm going to move on to my next team. It is in the West. I went with the Phoenix Suns. And there are a couple reasons why. I believe, if not in our last NBA episode, maybe, you go back a couple NBA episodes, we talked about the new CBA, right? And we talked about what is it called? The second tax apron, which at this year sits around $179.5 million. And basically, if you go above that second tax apron, a lot of like how would you describe it? You can't do certain things. Like, you're no longer allowed to do certain things. There are restrictions that will be applied to you for years to come if you are consistently above the second tax apron. You obviously have the luxury tax below that. When you look at the Suns and what they did, obviously they traded Chris Paul along with Landry Shamet to the Wizards. But of course, now Chris Paul's on the Warriors. They traded for Bradley Beal. So now they have Bradley Beal. They have Durant. They still have Booker. That trio is, of course, intriguing in and of itself, right? I mean, how good is that trio going to be offensively? How's everything going to work out? The dynamics between those three, obviously intriguing. When you add in Ayton, the Suns' salary cap, $161 million tied up between those 4 players. So basically, next year, those 4 players' salary, if Ayton, say, is still on the roster, will jump to $199 million in total between those 4 players, which are, I guess you could say, the big 4 in Phoenix right now. And the problem with that is they will then exceed the second tax apron starting next year if things remain the same. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with DeAndre Ayton's future. Will they trade him once it gets closer to the deadline? Will they trade him in season? We don't know. To potentially avoid going over that second tax apron, I wouldn't be surprised. And that's another reason that I think this team is intriguing. Is what is the future of DeAndre Ayton? I think that's a conversation that we'll have at some point during this season, whether that's closer to the trade deadline or maybe even early on in the season. How does the dynamic work between a Bradley Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant? I think it's going to work out well. I think it's going to be a really good offensive team. It's going to be a powerhouse offensively. What do they look like on defense? That's another question. And then, because of all that, they were forced to go out, kind of play in free agency with one hand tied behind their back. Restricted to minimum, veteran contracts only, but they made some really interesting moves. They brought in some depth, quality NBA depth to surround their 4 big players. Eric Gordon was a big one, the big addition. Utah, is it? Um, Gosh, I always
Yuta
struggle with.
Watanabe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that guy. Drew Eubanks, who I know. I don't have the full list in front of me, but they made some really interesting moves in free agency. I'm just interested to see how all of that is mixed together with Ayton, Booker, Durant, and Beal. And then, of course, they ousted Monty Williams. We can argue all day about whether or not that should have happened, but they bring in, I believe it's Frank Vogel, right?
Yeah. Yep.
As their new head coach, who, of course, won a championship a couple years back with the Lakers. So, what does all this look like for the Suns? I'm just very intrigued by what this team is going to look like going into 2023. I think they're probably championship contenders, but I mean, there are still questions to be answered there.
Yeah. It's an interesting conversation around the Suns for sure. And really, you can't really answer much questions until they start playing. We don't know how this is going to work. You have three perimeter oriented guys who um, you could argue are, you know, best with the ball in their hands. I would argue otherwise. I think all three of those guys can do stuff off ball, which is why I think I'm higher on this experiment than most other people. But even so, three players that have averaged 30 points per game in different points in their career. You throw three of those level of scores together, you don't really know what you're going to get from each of them, and most likely Bradley Beal is going to be the one that's going to have to sacrifice a little bit. And how is that going to work? How is he going to deal with that? So that's really where I have the question marks. It's not really whether or not it's going to work offensively. It's more so just what is the team dynamics going to be like, because we know they had some weird chemistry stuff go on last year. So if it goes smoothly this year and if those four guys stay healthy, there's no reason to think that they won't be a top 3 seed in the West.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Who's your fourth team? Who's your fourth and final team? I think I know where this is going.
Yeah, I considered a couple teams. I considered the Warriors, but ultimately it felt wrong to not have the Oklahoma City Thunder in this segment. I mean, you look at teams around the league, teams that are ready to make the next jump. Everybody's pointing to the Thunder, and for good reason. You have a superstar level player. I can't talk today. In Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 31.4 points per game last year, incredible efficiency, and did all that without even taking that many 3-pointers. I mean, this is a guy who is electric attacking the basket, borderline unstoppable. He doesn't even have to get all the way to the rim, but he has the strength. Once he gets even with you, even if you cut him off before the rim, he has that little floater, and he's just a elite finisher around the basket. I think that's one of the most underrated parts of his game as well. But beyond Shea has been a great scorer for years. They've got the help around him now. Jalen Williams, as a rookie last year, shot 52% from the field, averaged 14 points per game. That's really, really good for a rookie. And had a stretch there late in the season where he averaged 17 a game. Um, the real reason why everyone is so high on the Thunder is obviously Shea, Josh Gideon, Jalen Williams. But of course, they add in Chet Holmgren, the number 2 overall pick from the 2022 draft. You add him into the fold. This was a team who didn't have a true 7-footer on the roster last year. Josh Giddey, a shooting guard, a guy who is basically their quasi point guard, split ball handling duties, led their team in rebounds at 8 a game. They didn't really have a true big. So with Chet in the mix and now having some true rim protection into already what was a good defense last year, the sky is the limit for this team. They're not a contender by any means, but I would not be surprised to see the Thunder um, be a top 6 seed in the West, which is saying a lot.
Thunder are my team too, man. This team is too intriguing to not be on a list of most intriguing teams. And the way I kind of describe it is there's no more enjoyable stage of a team's life cycle in professional sports than exactly where the Oklahoma City Thunder stand right now. What do I mean by that? Well, they're ascending without really any real expectations yet, right? They're on the up and up. They don't really have any expectations to be that championship contender yet. They're young and talented. There's not really a whole lot of pressure on this team. They're uber talented uh, with a formidable price tag, right? They're not paying an exuberant amount as they have a lot of these players on their rookie deals. Uh, it's pretty affordable outside of, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. There's a lot of enthusiasm around the franchise without a whole lot of self-interest. And they've gotten to this point with patience and calculated decisions. One of the best GMs in the sport in Sam Presti, who I've respected for years, even going back to, I think, before the whole, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook situation, all the way back to when he started as a general manager with this organization, just year after year, making moves that keep this team competitive, even when we think they're not going to be acquiring all of that draft capital that they still have, over the next 5-10 years. I believe they have a ton. I
Yeah,
mean, too
like
many to count.
24 uh, top picks. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like the patience and the calculatedness of this front office and what they've been able to do through the draft, through making some calculated signings here and there in free agency, moving off star players at the right times to acquire this capital and build towards the future. It's been a really smart operation for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And when we talk about what they accomplished last year, 40-42, and they had the second youngest roster in the entire league. Um, Maturation process will continue. These players are only going to get better. And when you look at the core of this team, I mean, it's hard not to like what you see. Last year, they actually ended up with a pretty mediocre yield on both sides of the ball when it was all said and done. 16th in offensive rating. It's not terrible, but it's not great. It's right around, what their profile suggests they were as a team last year. And 13th, in defensive rating. So they were right around the middle of the league in both those core metrics, and they finished around 500. I think it's reasonable to expect some positive regression here as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander enters his physical prime, and the players that they have. I mean, how can you not like what Oklahoma City has on this roster with Josh Giddey, who's an excellent playmaker, with Jalen Williams, who you can argue is already the second best player on this team if you wanted to. I talk about Giddey, almost averaged 17 points and 8 rebounds last year. He was regularly flirting with triple doubles. You know, 6'8", good size, 20 years old, a walking mismatch. He's got patience. He's got a bottomless reservoir of options when caught in sticky situations. Excellent vision, great playmaker. Pairs really well with Gilgeous-Alexander in that backcourt. Then you bring in a guy like Jalen Williams, who, as I said, I mean, you can make the argument he's their second best player. He has all-star potential, and he's got a game that impresses on both sides of the floor. And they have these other pieces around them that are just going to play the right way, do the right things, solid role players, a lot of young talent. They draft Cason Wallace out of Kentucky, guy with size and athleticism and length on the perimeter who can do some things offensively, but is a little raw on that end of the floor. I'm excited to see what he looks like in year one. I think he has a lot of potential. And then Chet Holmgren, man. I mean, 7'1", whatever he is, 7'2", suffered a foot injury that ended his rookie year before it even began. Of course, with these type of players, you always worry about, their availability and their durability over an 82-game season. So they'll probably load manage him a little bit, but he's absolutely going to be a riveting and pivotal contributor to their team in 2023. And we have not seen him play yet. So that's like the most amount of intrigue you can have is top 3 pick, generational talent, you could argue, that we have not seen play yet. And he'll be inserted into a situation where he's got a ton of, some of the best young talent in the entire league around him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could talk for hours about Oklahoma City. My big question, I think, for them, and we can talk about this more once we get into closer to the season, we start doing our season preview. Can the Thunder be good enough to potentially accelerate this timeline a little bit? Or would they even want to accelerate this timeline a little bit? They have a ton of assets. So if this team, somehow does a lot better than we think, and there maybe could be some potential for making a run in the postseason, although I'm not saying that's going to happen. But if it did, would they go ahead and maybe use some of those assets to go and get whoever it may be that could maybe accelerate this timeline a little bit? I'm not sure, but I do think that at the end of the day, they will be probably around that 6-7 seed range on the borderline of play-in and or playoffs. And if I had to lean right now, I think I'd probably say they're right there as like potentially a number 6 seed in the West.
Yeah, it's hard to say right now, but
Yeah.
the great thing about what the Thunder have for these next few years is they have the ability to reload. Um, if a guy is up for a contract, they're going to have a guy in the pipeline that, say, you can throw in the G League for a couple years and be ready to go if you don't want to pay somebody. And they're going to have that flexibility in those options with all the draft picks they have.
Yeah, absolutely. The draft picks are huge. All the assets that they have, absolutely huge. And to add on to all of that we've already mentioned, they have Lou Dort, who's sort of like that cement glue type of player that you need on your team. An on-ball nuisance on defense. Boy, I mean,
Yeah.
he's the one guy that you hate to play against, but you would love to have on your team just because of the pain that he caused, the headaches that he can cause certain players on offense. And then they drafted this guy. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce his name, but they drafted a former EuroLeague MVP
Yeah.
with one of their
Poku.
picks. Yeah. Do you know how to say his name?
I think it's Pokushevsky, but I just call him Poku.
Yeah. He led the EuroLeague in scoring 2 seasons ago
Yeah.
when his team won its second straight championship. They also have guys like, um, uh, uh, Isaiah Joe.
Yeah.
And then
40% shooter.
I think they brought in Davis Bertans, who's
Yeah.
like that stretch 4 who can open up the floor and is a really good shooter. And so, I mean, there's a lot of interesting pieces here for sure.
Yeah. And that seems to be a common theme for them. They keep taking on these bad contracts in exchange for capital. But yeah, we're only 35 minutes in here. Do you want to add in one more team?
Um, Yeah, sure. I mean, we can take this conversation wherever you want. Extend this conversation out another 10, 15 minutes. Where do you
Yeah,
want to go?
I want to talk about the Warriors a little bit.
Okay.
Um, they obviously made that trade for Chris Paul. They traded away Jordan Poole, and obviously that situation between Poole and Draymond Green is well documented. We're not going to get into that right now, but the fit here is interesting. Um, the Warriors like playing fast. They play that free flowing offense. I think the the different styles maybe between their bench unit and their starters might be good, and it also could go horribly wrong. If you have Chris Paul off the bench and in the starters you're playing this fast paced style that they always play. Um, I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I'm really interested to see, but um, at the end of the day, they're still the Warriors and they still have Steph Curry, so I'm not gonna bet against them by any means.
Yeah, I'm not gonna bet against them at all. I mean, they're the Warriors. They have Steph Curry. They have Klay Thompson. They have Draymond Green. The core is still there. The meat of this team is still there. Of course, I mean the Draymond Green Jordan Poole situation just cracks me up. Um, but I, you know, their draft was interesting. They bring in Trace Jackson Davis from Indiana, versatile forward center, who was one of the best players in college basketball last year, let alone the Big Ten. Um, Athletic center, I think that can slot behind Kevon Looney. I think he's a perfect fit for this Warriors team. He's mature, played 4 years in college. Um, you know, uh, he's 23 years old already, so I think he can contribute right away as like a shot blocker and rim runner in those pick and rolls. Really like Trace Jackson Davis as a prospect. I was probably higher on him than most in the draft process and in college, dating back to when he was playing at Indiana, especially the past couple years. And then I don't know how to say the name of their first pick, so we'll save that for another time once I learn how to pronounce his name. But he's certainly an intriguing prospect. They bring in Corey Joseph for some more backcourt depth. Another important veteran to their roster. He replaces Dante DiVincenzo, who went on to sign with the Knicks in free agency. Uh, Excellent backup point guard. He has been that way for nearly a decade. He'll bring steadiness and continuity. He's done that throughout his career wherever he's landed. He's a little older, but he has championship experience. I think he'll fit in well to the culture and the mold of this Warriors team. Um, you know, there are questions for sure. Curry, Thompson, and Green aren't getting any younger. They're continue to age, but I think Curry's game is obviously aging fantastically, and I don't foresee that changing unless some injuries happen. Knock on wood. Klay Thompson, we've seen flashes of the old Klay Thompson at times. He's still a really solid player, and then Draymond Green's like the heart and soul of the Warriors. Whatever you think of him as a person or him as a player and the antics, some of the stuff that he does, it helps the team. And then you still have Steve Kerr. And the big thing is, what does Chris Paul's role look like? So there are interesting parts, but I do like what they did in the draft. I love Trace Jackson Davis. I think he's going to contribute, be an early contributor. Uh, Corey Joseph, really underrated move. He'll he'll play a role. I think he'll be solid. They're not going to ask him to do a whole lot. And then, you still have Kevin Looney, who had, a really good run in the playoffs. Was it last year that he did or the year
Yeah, he
before?
had multiple 20 rebound
Yeah,
games, and he
absolutely.
got
So,
hurt in that Lakers series, and they really
yeah,
missed him.
yeah, they did. And then they're going to need him to be available. So, yeah, I mean, the Warriors, we can continue to talk about them as we enter September and get into training camp, but absolutely, they're very intriguing. Is there
Yeah.
one other storyline and or team that you want to get into
Well,
before
I
we
do
wrap
want to
it?
touch on one last thing with the Warriors is
Okay.
I think their ceiling raisers, their two ceiling raisers, is going to be Andrew Wiggins and Jonathan Kuminga. I mean,
Right about
who
those
are
two.
those two guys? I mean, obviously Wiggins, he's capable of averaging 20 points per game. He's done it before with the Timberwolves, and for this team in particular, I think he's going to need to. I think All-Star Andrew Wiggins has to return if the Warriors are going to be a top 3 seed in the West this year. With how good the West is, Andrew Wiggins has to be big for them. He has to be their second best player, in my opinion. And then, of course, Jonathan Kuminga. He's the last of their young core that everyone was so high on going into last year. Everybody was after that 22-22 championship run. Um, after that 2022 championship run, um, everybody was like, okay, they lost some of their veterans, but you're going to plug those young guys right into those spots, and they're going to be right back again. And that just didn't happen last year. So Kuminga is the last guy standing, and he's got to take a step this year. It's year 3. It's time to go. We'll see what happens with him, but I think him playing significant minutes and playing a role for this team is going to be imperative because they need the athleticism, they need the, um, you know, energy off the bench.
Absolutely. I certainly agree with that. I didn't even mention Andrew Wiggins. How could I forget? But yeah, absolutely. They need that athleticism. They need that production from the wing position. And we've seen what Andrew Wiggins can be. We saw him when he first got to the Warriors and what difference he made. But, you know, that and along with Kuminga, they've got to play their roles and play them well. Is there anything else we want to get into before we wrap this thing up?
Well, I don't want to say too much more just because there's still dominoes to fall here with the Damian Lillard situation, and that could happen pretty soon, apparently. But um, I do want to touch on the 76ers real fast. Recently, James Harden, I believe it was a basketball camp in China, came out and said, Daryl Morey is a liar and I will not be in an organization that he is a part of. And he said it and he like doubled down too for no reason. It's not like they asked him to say it twice, but he was like, I'll say it again, I'll repeat it. And he was so adamant about it. This feels like a team that's just cursed, man. I don't know much else to say there. I almost feel bad for Embiid, but I also don't. It's tough, man. They still have Tyrese Maxey. They still have some talent there, but with James Harden seemingly not playing for whatever money they're going to be paying him, it's going to be tough sledding.
My question, and maybe I'm missing something here. Where did this come from? Like, do you have? Well, first of all, did you want to say something?
Well, the speculation has been, and it's all speculation right now. Nothing's really come out. The speculation is that last year James Harden took the pay cut with the idea that okay, I'll get my money next year, and it's weird that James Harden is so um, offended by not getting his deal this year because if the 76ers did promise him a contract this summer, then that would be tampering. So there's definitely something under the surface here that is yet to come out. There's still dominoes yet to fall here for sure.
Yeah, it's just interesting because it comes so it seems suddenly because this has been a relationship for years, dating back to their days in Houston. And suddenly
Yeah.
it seems like, based on Harden's comments, he's made clear multiple times that, and as you mentioned, he's doubled down on it. He's reiterated his point that, whenever asked, he's made it clear that for whatever reasons that are behind this, his relationship with Daryl Morey all of a sudden seems to be at a point beyond repair, seemingly,
Yeah.
based on his comments. And he's shown in the past his willingness to do just about anything to get an escape from his current situation. And so I think this is going to be a situation where Harden continues to keep that stance. He'll probably hold that stance. And it's going to be a situation where, he's keeping the pressure on Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey, who, it's going to be interesting to see how this potential distraction could affect the rest of the existing players that Philadelphia has, in particular, one being Joel Embiid. Does it affect Embiid's future in Philadelphia? Because if he becomes disgruntled and he asks for a trade, and give him credit, he's withstood a lot of drama in
Yeah.
Philadelphia throughout his career, and he said all the right things in the media. He's great with the media, but
For the most part.
for the most part. But there comes a point in time where, enough is enough, right?
Yeah.
And he's top 5 player in the league, I'd argue. So, he's eventually going to want to go and, do what great players want to do, and that's win championships. And I just don't see it happening in Philadelphia with everything that's going on. No chance with Milwaukee and Boston and all the other teams that we could talk about in the East. My real question is, how does this situation affect Embiid? Because if Embiid's out, the Sixers are in big, 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 big trouble.
Yeah. Because then all of a sudden, Maxi's up for a rookie extension, and you're just screwed, man. It's going to be interesting to see how the dominoes fall, like I said, but this feels like a team that the chemistry is going to be brutal. Even if something happens where the Sixers are like, "Oh, we're not going to trade you, James. We're just going to have you not play." Even then, you're just not going to have a $35 million player in the lineup, which is, say what you want about James Harden, that's significant with how much he did in terms of ball handling last year. So
Yeah, and playmaking. And look,
yeah,
however this ends up, I cannot wait for whatever documentary is going to be produced
oh
about
my god,
this era of
the
Philadelphia
process.
76ers basketball. Whether it's a 30 for 30, an HBO spot, a Netflix documentary, whatever it might be, there's got to be something on this era of Philadelphia 76ers basketball. There's so much. That could probably be like a Last Dance type of thing where it's 8 to 10 parts. There's so much that's happened with this team the past half decade.
Yeah, you could do something on Doc Rivers' coaching career in general, to be honest, and
Exactly, yeah.
it's just never ending. But man, yeah, I don't know, man. This team has been a storyline machine the last few years, that's for sure. With the whole Ben Simmons situation, and then Daryl Morey, even with the red flags that James Harden had in Brooklyn, with the hamstring stuff, and with obviously the drama that went down there as well, which wasn't all his fault. It wasn't really his fault at all, actually, but there were red flags there, and Daryl Morey went out of his way to go get Harden, and with Brooklyn knowing that the Sixers were desperate, got more out of that deal. Um, it's just all falling apart. It's crazy.
Yeah, we've ended up in a really good spot right at the 50-minute mark. and we got 2 extra topics in that we did not even plan to talk about.
Yeah.
Really fruitful conversation. Look, I know it's football season and football season starting, and that's where our focus lies, but this has reinvigorated some basketball interest on my side of things, at least. And so I think sometime in September, we'll be back with more basketball talk. And hopefully, maybe on the Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports podcast or the Patreon podcast, we can start talking college basketball a little earlier this year.
Yep.
And hopefully I can get Emmy involved in that conversation as well. A lot of interesting moves this offseason as it pertains to college basketball realm. And so we'll be doing all of that. Make sure you go like and subscribe to all of our content. Check out all our NFL stuff. Check out this episode. Check out Dit Hole or Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Check out the live episode we recorded earlier tonight. And enjoy all the football and all the sports that are going on. Emmy, why don't you tell us about the Live Take app before we get out of here for today?
Yeah. Live Take is a app where basically you can have conversations on any sports topic you can think of with people. It's a debate app. Basically, you go on there, you debate hot takes, whether it be the GOAT debate or just random sports topics, anything you can really think of. Um, it's honestly, I've used it a bit today just from starting out with it. It's an amazing app. I highly recommend it. The link's going to be in the description. It's also going to be that QR code on the screen right now. Go check it out and go follow me on there. It's going to be Emmy Nixon RPP, which stands for Raw Prospect Pod, but I couldn't put all that in, obviously. Me and Michael are going to be on there a lot debating, and we don't debate a lot on this podcast. That might be a different side of things that you might be interested in. So go check us out on there. Go download the app and get involved, man. It's gonna be a movement.
Yeah, and I'm not on there yet. I just heard about this today, actually. But by the time you hear us again early next week on a podcast, I will be on there, and so you will see Emmy and I doing some content on there. You'll also see us on TikTok. I'm really excited to see what this app has in terms of the amount of content that we can dive into. I mean, we could do NFL, we could probably do NBA, we could do some baseball, we could do a whole bunch of things, I bet. So I
Yeah.
will be checking that out and expect to see some content soon on there. And I don't know if I'll be Michael Ween RPP. I don't know if I could fit that all in one username, but maybe I'll be something similar to what Emmy is, since we're both on the Raw Prospect podcast. But yeah, that's going to do it. Great NBA episode. Love talking NBA. Again, go check out all our content, like, subscribe to our channel. With all that being said, enjoy your night, enjoy your weekend, and just like James Harden's relationship with Daryl Morey, seemingly we are going, gone. Peace out.
Peace out.